Hello and welcome back to Marineford TCG. My name is Joe. Drink of the day is a peach iced tea from my local Chinese supermarket. And what about those bans and unbans? What did you think? It was not what I was expecting, but I can't say I'm disappointed. And let's jump into exactly what's happened. So I'll move my face quickly. There we go. Pudding has been banned. A lot of people have been wanting this for a very long time. I was very much on the fence. Classic politician. No, I can see both the merits and demerits of banning this card. I'm interested to see how obnoxious big hand decks become. Because at times where Pudding hasn't been a good card, because Blue's not been very popular, they've been certainly somewhat obnoxious. But the banning of this card is going to make those stupid lethals, where you get Puddinged out of all your counter events and into 5 bricks, or the games where they just putting you on curve, and you're just shit out of luck. They're not going to be a thing anymore, so I'm really excited to talk more about this in a minute. We also have the unbanning of Jinbe, which I don't think is very impactful for Standard, in all honesty. And Kingdom Come, which is one that I think some people, like Merry TCG, seem to be expecting. I sort of thought it could, but I didn't know if they would want to unban it. Especially with Red Rock rotating. This is now one of the cheapest ways to remove anything. And we'll talk about all of these cards on the upcoming slide, starting off with none other than Pudding. I'll put myself here. There we go. Look at that. Marineford upscale. Anyway, Charlotte Pudding has been banned. This card was used in the vast majority of blue decks to just absolutely punish the opponent for having a big hand size. And it also just the threat of it, right? Even if you were playing into a Lucy, like, Lucy didn't always play Pudding, but they could. So if you have, like, a 9-card hand, you're in trouble. You could just lose the game on the spot if they play that Pudding, and you draw badly off of it. So I think the removal of this card as an option is going to be a big buff for all of these decks here. Bonnie is actually a bit weird, because the reason Bonnie really liked a big hand in the past was 8-cost Kid. Obviously in Expanded, you can still do that, but with 8-cost Kid rotating, I don't think Bonnie's going to need as big a hand as she has in the past. However, Bonnie is definitely a build-a-board deck, and having a big hand can help her save that. So I would say Bonnie is a winner. Ace is a winner and a loser. Obviously, Ace got to abuse the hell out of this card, but he also didn't particularly like getting hit with this card. As Ace, you'll routinely have, I don't know, like 8, 9, 10, even up to like 12 cards in hand. So not being at risk of putting into other blue decks is going to be a buff for Ace, no doubt. And Lucy as well was the new deck. This deck has insane card draw, with the 4-cost Cavendish, the leader effect, of course, and all the events that give you more draw. So Lucy, again, would routinely have upwards of 8 cards in hand. I've seen Lucy's regularly on the sim get to 12. I don't know if that's optimal, but it's certainly something. And not being able to put in that 12-card hand is going to be pretty spicy. Up Luffy as well, you can't get Pudding out of all your Gum Giants anymore. Big buff for Luffy, and you won't also lose your stack, which is pretty cool. And finally, these 2 late-game yellow decks. Enel, we've got more to talk about later with Raigo, but Enel has always had a big hand. Back when he was really meta, he had a big hand. Now you don't see so much Enel anymore, because Emu has been a problematic matchup, among other things. But with the reintroduction of Raigo and Emu's waning popularity, it could be interesting to see if Enel does come back, despite a few losses to rotation. Finally, Jewelry Bonnie. I think this deck was kind of DOA when I played it initially, because of the combination of Pudding, Red Rock. But now being able to more efficiently sit at 1 with a big hand size and be a 7 or 9k leader, that seems good for Bonnie. That's pretty exciting, because this is going to be, I think, a slightly different deck in the West as in the East. When they got it at least, just because of rotation and this ban. Now, let's talk about some losers. I think it's these blue-yellow decks. Obviously, every blue deck loved to play this, but a lot of blue decks didn't like getting hit by this either, so that kind of counters out a little bit. But Nami was an absolute abuser of this card. It's one of the only decks that you could actually search it in, other than UP Luffy, kinda, because she has the Universal Searcher, but Ace as well, to be fair. But Nami abused either life burn effects or bounce effects like Nojiko to give your opponent a big hand, that they couldn't really play around, and then Pudding it, and just take all those resources away. So I think losing Pudding is going to be a mega hit for Nami, and Nami also loses Red Rock to rotation, which is pretty big. Also, Boa. Boa's lethals rely very heavily on Perfume Femur plus Pudding, and without Pudding, those Femur hits might actually be counterable now. So going down to 0, while still scary because of Femur, isn't going to be as scary as it was before. Also, Hancock did the same sort of things as Nami. She didn't play Nojiko for obvious reasons, but she still burned your life, made you take extra cards, and then would Pudding you, so you lose those resources. So I think for me, these are the two biggest losers, and they are also some of the best decks in the game, so I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. Look, I'm buff now! Jinbe has also been banned. Oh dear. Let me move you down so you can see the power. Jinbe had been a menace in Blue Doflamingo in the past, was one of the main reasons this deck was just insane. Those early game 3-Don turn Jinbe and something else combos, be it Law, be it a Weevil, whatever, they were very, very, very powerful. And Jinbe is still going to be a menace in Doflamingo in extra regulation. It's going to be interesting now that we actually have some things in extra regulation, with the Pudding ban and this unban, as well as all the other unbans. It's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, right? Because I was thinking before this came back, before this was confirmed, that extra regulation and standard will be very, very similar, but it doesn't seem like that's going to be the case at all, which is quite interesting. And the reintroduction of Jinbe is going to make Doflamingo a very, very powerful aggro tempo deck in extra regulation, which is very hype. I'm not surprised this came back, because I don't think this has very many ramifications for standard. Like, you can play this in Blue Boa, and it will be a nice buff to Blue Boa for sure. But I can't see you playing this in Blue Yellow Boa. There's simply not enough targets. And we don't really have another deck that really wants to operate around this Warlords package. If there's something you think I'm missing, let me know. But I think outside of Doflamingo in extra regulation, and Boa getting a buff from terrible to rogue, maybe, in standard. I hope she's better than that, but we'll see. Temper your expectations, maybe. But yeah, this is quite exciting, and quite an expected one. The one that was less expected is Raigo. This is also called Kingdom Come. If you are a newer player, your physical copies will say Kingdom Come. This is simply the image that I have access to. And yeah, this card was crazy back in the NL, back in the day. Look at him, he's so surprised to get it back. But yeah, Raigo back in NL let you be pretty good against small stuff with your sort of on-curve removal. You have really good removal up to 5 costs. And then, because NL likes to sit at 1 naturally because of his leader effect, Raigo just had no cost and was an answer to big stuff. It's going to be interesting to see if NL actually comes back, because obviously he's still going to have some tricky matchups, but the reintroduction of Raigo and the banning of Pudding are both two, like, massive buffs to Yellow and L. And this is a deck with a very particular playstyle, and it also has a very particular playstyle when you are opposing him. So where sometimes you would starve an L, you would do swings in strange orders and just not swing a lot of the time to avoid giving him triggers and things. So it's going to be very interesting to see how an L ends up being built going forward, and if he is good. BY Luffy was the other deck in the past that abused the hell out of this card. BY Luffy still doesn't have Warrior, but again, the banning of Pudding and the reintroduction of Raigo are both two big buffs for BY. It gives him a good way to deal with big stuff, and stops his hand being shuffled away, of course. Being a 9k leader is nowhere near as insane as it was back when this guy dominated the meta, and he's no longer going to benefit from just hard countering Lucci like he did back in the day, because the other top decks, they're just not removal decks, and he will still be weak to removal, I think. But this, combined with the banning of Pudding and the new cards from OP15, specifically that 5-cost Luffy especially, are quite exciting for this deck. A bit more experimental are Luffy and Calgara. Luffy and Calgara can sit at 1, and you can actually heal back on a 10-Don turn. Either if you've got the 10-cost L in play, which is probably a big winner from this as well, but it's a character, so I didn't put it on the slide. But you can just play this and then play the 4-cost Sorrow to get a heal. So you can still be at 2. And of course, with Hiyori and Rayquaza and Borsalino, Yeah. We can still heal, don't worry. But yeah, this card is insane. It's just not insane when the cost actually matters. Because trashing like 2 lives is very debilitating. But when you're just at 1 anyway, who cares? And of course, it's searchable in both of these decks because they are Sky Island focused. Jewelry Bonnie is not going to be able to search this, but this deck just wants to sit at 1 anyway. So I'm quite interested to try this in Bonnie. And this combined with the banning of Pudding, I think are good times for Bonnie enthusiasts. Not sure how important this will be without testing it. It's very hard to say. But no doubt at least a card worth trying out in Bonnie. And we'll give her an answer to big stuff, which is pretty cool. And also Vegapunk. Vegapunk didn't get Rayquaza and Borsalino hit at all. Which, I mean, Vegapunk's not been doing well. Don't get me wrong. We'll talk about the meta more in a minute. But Vegapunk with access to big stuff removal and all that healing spam from Rayquaza and Borsalino, which he can set up so much better than everyone else, I think is going to be very, very interesting to see. Again, can he become meta? At the very least, he's very good at healing, so into some of the more aggro decks, maybe he can have a place there. Purple and Nell seems like it might be a tricky one, but I don't know. We'll have to see. I'm excited to try Old Man Vegapunk again. Now, here's like a snapshot of the flagship meta over in Japan. This is the most recent data from OP Hirata. Make sure you follow OP Hirata on X. He has all these posts with the leaders and the representation based on their flagship wins. And as you can see, the best deck is currently a Nell by this data, and he wasn't hit at all. However, right behind him was Boa and Nami. These blue-yellow decks become a bit of a menace after the Borsalino-Rayquaza combo was discovered. It's going to be interesting to see how these bans affect these 2 blue-yellow leaders. Both of them definitely relied on Pudding quite a lot. Probably Boa less than Nami. So I don't think this hurts Boa too much. And Raigo is just not that great into Boa, right? Because you don't want to KO Boa's stuff anyway. I don't think that reintroduction really hurts Boa that much. As for Nami, she was getting hit by rotation anyway, so that combined with the Pudding loss, I think is big. I would not be surprised to see Nami fall down at least a tier in representation when we get this stuff in the West. It's going to be interesting to see how this affects decks lower down the tier list. There's going to be a lot of testing that needs to be done over the next couple of weeks as we approach our format. Hope the sim's updated soon so I can get to grinding. Very excited to try especially these yellow decks with Raigo. Yellow and Nell, honestly, I think could be pretty hyped, man. The purple and Nell is going to be probably a bad matchup for him because you can't deal with those 6-costed Nells efficiently. Maybe you'd have to go down a more life burny route to try and deal with that. Because obviously having Raigo back gives him great KO power into big stuff decks. You know, into Lucy, you can just blow up all their Sabos, which seems pretty good. Into Mihawk, you can blow up his Lord Beppos. But dealing with those 6-costed Nells, I think, is going to be very tricky for the deck. Also, and this ties into the next slide a little bit, but Ace and Emu went untouched. Looking at this data, I'm not surprised. These have both been a bit of a menace in the West, more so in OP 13 and 14. And when this ban announcement was made, I articulated myself a little poorly. What I meant to say is that I don't think anything needs to be banned, but I did expect those decks to get hit. But they didn't. And looking at this data, I think Bandai have absolutely made the right call. Banning Emu's stage when it has as many wins as Green Zoro would make absolutely no sense. And banning Ace's event, while he's already been falling off a little bit, I think would equally have not been the wisest decision. However, with the removal of Pudding, that is probably a buff for both of these decks. They're both pretty happy to sit at a fairly high hand count. Emu less so, but the threat of Pudding was always scary for Emu. Getting Pudding just from 7 to 5 and losing 2 resources could be make or break for that deck. Ace less so, he could recover, but it's still going to be nice for Ace mains that they don't have to play around Pudding anymore. And yeah, these were some of the other cards that people expected to get banned. We've just talked about Emu. This is just here to represent any card in the deck. There are a bunch of different suggestions. But yeah, I think they made the right call on these, honestly. I wouldn't have been upset to see I'm Whitebeard go. Not gonna lie. I'm not a big Ace enjoyer. I'm not particularly a big Emu enjoyer either, but looking at that data, seeing especially Emu down to 2 wins compared to like 40 or an L in the same period. It's clearly not a great deck anymore, and the fall-off needs to be studied. The other combo that people expected to get hit in some way, be it a leader locking, a pair ban, something like that, Borsalino and Rayquaza. Please save me. It's called I Rayquaza Help in English. But yeah, this combo is the reason, one of the reasons why there's so much yellow up here, right? New Luffy, Nami, Boa, also Calgara here. Although I've seen quite a lot of lists of Calgara that weren't playing Rayquaza, they were just playing Borsalino. And this Borsalino is still an insane card. Maybe we'll just power creep it, but I wouldn't be surprised in future if this does get touched. But it'll be interesting to see how the meta develops. Is it as yellow without pudding? Because these two top yellow decks, they're both pudding decks. They both abuse pudding. So, was the problem with these decks pudding? Was it Rayquaza? We'll find out soon. I was initially going to make this a video talking about both the bans and the leaders, but I've kind of yapped for longer than I was expecting. So we're just going to do bans in this one, and then my opinions on the new leaders will be up later today. Let me know in the comments what you think of these bans. Is there anything that you think should have been banned that wasn't? I know a lot of people I think are going to be very passionate about Borsalino-Rayquaza combo. And what do you think of the Raigo unban especially? A lot of people, I think, were expecting Jinbe, and I really don't think he's going to do very much. But the Raigo unban, that was more unexpected, I think, certainly to me. I didn't think they would bring it back, and I'm quite excited to see how the meta adapts to that card existing once again. Let me know in the comments your thoughts. Thank you for watching, and I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.